Hello, my name is Hector Mestre from Mestre Quality Studio. This is the second video about what's the difference between mixing and mastering. Today's focus is going to be mixing. In the last video, I explained what's the difference between mixing and mastering. I explained that the person that masters is the one that turns in the job. He's the one that does the final touches to the spectrum of the mix. That means he's the one that makes it louder, puts a little bit of more compression, makes it brighter, or just many different things. He's the one that does all the fade outs, fade in of the song, and he's just the one that does all the final touches, making it able to be played in any radio station and also to upload it, how I said before in the other video, in iTunes and Spotify and Google Play, whatever it is that you're going to use to download that specific song or album. Moving on to the person that mixes. He is the one that is in charge of bringing up or down the volume of each track, pan them, EQ, compress, or put some reverb, gates, whatever is needed to make that whole session sound good. He is painting. He's the one that paints. He's the one that puts the amount of reverb needed in a song, in the guitar, main vocals, drums. He's the one that works with making sure that the drum is not overpowering the guitar and that the guitar is coming through the acoustic guitars. He's the one that works with the whole session separate. It's two different type of jobs. I have a session here open from an album that I worked a while back. I was going to talk about the one that I did over in the mastering, but I decided to do this session because this one has strings, it has guitars. I'm not going to put the song, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the plugins that I use in this session to make it sound good. Here we have the first track. It is the master fader. I have a bus compressor. If you can see, I don't have any reverb. I don't have any EQ, nothing at all. Usually the way I use that is that I mix the whole song, and after I'm done mixing the whole song is when I put the actual bus compressor. So I can see if things are gluing the way I was expecting to. Sometimes I start to see that once I put the compressor on, maybe the bass comes up a little more, so I have to bring it down. What the compressor does is kind of glue the whole thing together, makes it sound together in a way that you can hear every instrument a little more detail after you're done mixing it. And I'm not saying that you don't use compressor in the separate tracks, but this is how we do it and a lot of people do it. And analog, like the SSLs, the API, all those mixers, they do have bus compressors. So this would be doing the same type of job, but in a DAW system. I'm gonna move on to the pianos. This piano right here has the room mics, it has the close miking, and it has also the spectrum of the actual instrument. As you can see here in the piano track, this is an aux. I send all the piano there, and then I put the dream verb, and let me see if I put any EQ. No. What I think that happened with this session, I kind of remember when I mixed this session, is that I pre-EQ'd everything on the mixer and the analog console to upload it into the system. So I kind of remember doing that. But usually for a session like this in piano, I use the Harrison EQ from Universal Audio. That sounds great. This is the violin sections here: violin 1, violin 2, violas, cellos, and then I have another aux that I send all those violins to. I have the neve here again, and that's to glue the violins together so they can sound good. I have the precision equalizer. When I EQ the violins, they sound really good so I just kind of touch. If I need them to come through a little more, I would maybe add some mid-range or any, I don't know, brightness on the upper, you know, 9K, 10Ks, just so I can hear the string of the string sections. This is Dreamverb. This is a reverb that I really love from Universal Audio. This is the pad. For pads, I just used, you know, some EQ because, you know, the pad sounded good enough. Here are the guitars. The guitars, I did the same thing. I go ahead and I record all the main power chord guitars, and then I send them to aux. Now, if I have a separate individual track like this one, I would put like an EQ, you know, kind of touch it to separate from the actual main mix of the rhythm guitars. Down here, you can see that this is the aux that I use for guitars. I use the Neve compressor to glue all the guitars. Okay, I always tend to glue things to focus on the mix of the guitars, and I come in and I glue it. I use the same system that I use to glue the whole mix of the session. I use the API channel strip. It's really good on guitars. Just simple EQ. I'll show you now. This is how the equalizer, compressor, gate. It also has low pass, high pass filter. It's a great plugin. The compressor is really fast, and you can put it soft too, but I like the fast compression for snare sometimes. Also use the gate on snare or tom if I need to gate some. It's a very beautiful sounding plugin. It has that API heritage. I do the acoustic guitars exactly the same way. I mix all the tracks onto an aux, and then I go ahead and I mix to the aux. I'm gonna show you what I have here on the guitars. I have the LA2A, the Harrison. This is the plugin that I usually say that I use on the piano. It's a great plugin. It's based on the console Harrison. Dreamverb. Now moving on to the drums. This is the outside kick mic. I don't have any plugins in this session. I decided to send it also to an aux. I have the inside kick mic. This is where I send the kick to. If you can see, this is an aux, and in that aux I use for kick. I use the channel strip here, precision limiter, and the Harrison 32. Great plugin, how I said before. Snare. This is the snare top. It doesn't have any plugins because I also send them to an aux. This is the bottom of the snare, and this is the aux, and I did the same thing. Moving on to the toms. I did not send the toms to any type of aux. I just left them as they are. This is the enhancer hertz. What I did in this session, so I can get the tom sound that I wanted, I went ahead and went to the actual frequency that the tom is in, and I made that resonance, I made it to come out a little more, and that's why I used the kilohertz. Let me show you this plugin. It looks just like the one that I use in the mastering to make things a little brighter, where this does the same thing but in the hertz. What I do, I look for the frequency, bring up that frequency from where the tom is located at, and then I go ahead and I just bring it up, and I can make the tom ring a little more if I wanted to. This is the API channel strip again. This is the floor tom 3. Here I have a hertz EQ, but this one I tend to go pretty low in the frequencies. I look around 88 hertz, 96, or even 81, around there. And I bring it up so I can have that boom, boom, boom sound. Especially that the floor tom that I use for this session is actually 14, not 16. and API Vision Channel Strip, Danger Q. This is the hi-hat, Q10. Well, I use this plugin very lightly. This is from Waves. I try not to EQ much the hi-hat, especially because the hi-hats that I have, they are a little bright. Here I have the overhead microphones. I have also a simple EQ there because I really like the way the cymbals sounded. So it's just something simple. I have the room, the closed mics. I put some compression on it. The 1176 and you know. Room 1. This is a little further microphone. I didn't put an EQ, it sounded good. I use the same principle here. I send all the drums to a stereo aux, and the same thing with the background vocals. All this that says B-Voice 1, B-Voice 2, B-Voice 3, all of those are tracks for recording background vocals. All my background vocals are sitting there, and then the same thing. I send all that to an aux input, and I'll mix to that, and then I put a compressor. Voice 1, Waves 2, I use that to fix a couple of vocals. I use the Vision Channel Strip, Harrison. I use the Vision Channel Strip since it has a compressor. I used it for compressor. Then de-esser because the S's were a little too strong. Used it very light, still make it sound that. The de-esser is really good. I love it. I love the de-esser because it does not change the sound of the vocal, and it does not compress the vocal where you can hear that it's actually doing something really bad. I've heard plugins before that when you use the de-esser, it starts compressing to bring that de-esser with the EQ down, and this one doesn't do that. It is so clean, you can't even tell that it's doing what it's doing. It's like if it was actually grabbing the S's for you, bring them down, and that's what it's supposed to do. But you hear it so natural. It sounds beautiful. And I also use here the LA2A gray. This is a fast attack. R-Verb. I use that in vocals. I usually use the Dream Verb. I don't know why I use this one here. And long delay, just to create a kind of like a wider spectrum of the vocal, make it sound much bigger. There it goes. That's my mixing session. You were able to see some of the plugins that I use for mixing. Session is full of plugins all over the place. Sometimes I use them hard or I use them softly, all depends. I make sure that the pan sounds good, that they are placed in the proper space. I do that with the drums. I usually use the spectrum of a player on drums. A lot of people like the spectrum, like if it was seeing it from a crowd, but I like the spectrum of the drummer because I am a drummer myself. So I like to go from left to right. A lot of people like it from right to left, being the floor tom in the left hand side and the high tom on the right. I don't like it like that. I like to hear how I play drums. And just think about it, when you buy a piano plugin, the piano is actually at the player spectrum, so I don't see why there's a problem with having it as drummer's spectrum. Well guys, thank you for watching. Hope you like this video. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and any comments, any questions that you have, you can just always leave them below and I'll answer as soon as possible. Thank you.